Hello there, and welcome to the Dear Dyslexic podcast series, brought to you by Rethink Dyslexia, the podcast where we're breaking barriers and doing things differently. I'm Shae, your host, and I'm so glad you can join us. I'm a fellow neurodivergent, and I'm coming from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, where I live and work. And I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to all the tribes across our beautiful country and to all First Nations people listening today. Our podcast was born in 2017 out of a need to give a voice to the stories and perspectives of adults with dyslexia. And our voice has grown stronger year after year. We're now a globally listened to podcast with guests from all around the world. Join us for insightful conversations about living with dyslexia and other neurodivergences across all walks of life. Our special focus is on adult education, employment, social and emotional wellbeing, and entrepreneurship. We're excited to be bringing you this episode and invite you to like and follow us, or even better, why not leave us a review on your favourite podcast platform. So let's get started. Today I am speaking to Bill, who is a PhD colleague of mine. And when I say colleague, we met through our PhD support group that we run through the foundation, and Bill is a peer, I should say, rather than a colleague. And I'd like to welcome him onto the show today, where we'll be talking about everything to do with research and being dyslexic and trying to do a PhD. So welcome to the show, Bill.
Thanks. Good to be here. Thanks for asking me.
No, thanks for coming along. Especially because we've just spent the last half an hour chatting instead of doing our podcast. So
I know dyslexics get distracted. Yeah,
we do very much, which I think is one of the good things about having our PhD group, because we get to talk about trying to do our PhDs, but also all the different facets of life that come with studying and being dyslexic. And you are studying a very interesting topic, one that blows my mind because I can't do numbers at all. So how did you end up doing your PhD? What led you on this crazy journey of academia?
Oh, wow. How do you sum it up?
Big question.
For those listening, I'm a mature age student, but I'm like I'm like 50. Over 50, yeah, thanks. So I had decades of life in between, and school was horrible, and I have very few good memories of it. So, but I always loved learning, and I felt I was good at it. And I don't know, as I got older, I did little things through TAFE because I wanted to do human resources. So I did the TAFE diploma, and I started doing the advanced diploma, and I topped the year. And this was like late 20s. So suddenly I was sort of in a situation where I wanted something. I applied to get into it, and it's all sort of like surprising how I sort of got into it. Because half of me is thinking, yeah, like I'm going to be able to do this, but I did, and yeah, I totally topped the year, and which suddenly opened a door that I didn't really believe was there for me in the past, and then I sort of thought I can do this, and it wasn't until recently, I suppose, in my recent life, that I got into a situation where I could choose what I wanted to do. So in a kind of an odd kind of a way, it's like going back in time, and I was fascinated by, I do a PhD in marine biology. So I was fascinated by animals and, the marine life and stuff like that. And suddenly when I went to university and I was looking at applying, it quickly became a reality that I could almost or pretty well apply for any degree I wanted. And from someone who like failed, year 12 and dropped out because they were failing it, and failed grade 2 and stuff like this, and hated school. This was like one of those epiphanies of, oh my God, I can do my dream as So I turned into a kid again and picked marine biology and I didn't really think I could do a PhD in it. I didn't even know what a PhD was, to be honest. Even though my dad's a doctor, I didn't know. So as I went through it, I figured, oh my God, I could do this, and I'm really good at it. And then I got into honors, and then the dyslexia thing started sort of hitting a bit, and then I wasn't sure whether I could do a PhD, but everyone else thought I could, and so I was like, that's good enough for me. Let's give it a go, and here I am.
I've got lots of questions to ask you, but going back in time, you said school was horrible for you. So we're of an ilk where diagnosis just did not exist. So were you diagnosed as an adult as well when you were doing university?
Yeah. So my dad is a retired doctor, psychiatrist. So there's a bit of understanding in terms of neurodifferences. And, my mum was just like, my child is smarter than failing grade 2, because I failed grade 2. So, I forgot the question, Shae. This is me. This is a very dyslexic me thing of like getting totally sidetracked. I'm so sorry.
No. Now, what was the
question?
question? I think the question was around diagnosis. Were you diagnosed as
yes.
like I was? Because we're older, and there wasn't such a thing, I don't think, of dyslexia diagnosis back when we were.
So I'm so random. Anyway, so yeah. Look. So there's something wrong with what the school thought I was like, because they just thought I was dumb and stupid and lazy and that type of thing. And what I could do, because I could tell them all of my parents all about animals, and mum would be in the car going, oh, what's this plus this, and there'd be big numbers and stuff, and none of the adults could do it, and I just pop and go, blah, 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 and say it. And they'd be like, there's a disconnect there. So my mum sort of could pick there's something different about me. So they got me tested in a time where, I don't know, someone could qualify this, but, I reckon half the people as described to me didn't even realize dyslexia existed. And some of the teachers, like half teachers would be like, no, it doesn't, that's rubbish. But she got me assessed then. But I lost that assessment, and at university, they asked for an assessment, and I'm not even sure they would accept assessment from me, since I was like late 40s at that stage, and the assessment's 12. So I tried uni the first semester, because when I did that course in the past, I told you about, I never told anyone I was dyslexic. I tried it, but after the first semester, it became very clear that you could pretty well wipe off maybe 20 to 30% of my grades off of every single subject just before I started it, because of my disability. And it became obvious in second semester that to give me a chance to actually do well in it, I needed to say, hey, I've got a disability, and to get acknowledged, I needed another testing. So I got tested twice, and hey, the assessments align very neatly, which is interesting over 30 years later.
That is interesting. I've always wondered if I should get reassessed, because at the time I was going through my divorce, so I was in a really bad state. So I wonder if there'd be any improvements now, and trying to do my PhD, surely I've improved somewhat with my writing, but it would be interesting to see. And it's interesting that you say 30 years difference, that they still pretty much aligned.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting point, because they aligned in terms of the how the different psychologists, one was done by one, the other one was assessed by two. And the two reports align in the sense that they talk about how, the deficits you have, and they sort of value it. And those values were basically the same. What was fascinating about it, I found it in these two reports, is kind of one of those things, and I'm happy to share them with you, because I just think they're fascinating. Is that I read better, and so I'd improved, which is it was brilliant, and that was just like, that was amazing, and and it sticks in. It's one of those things that I think we were talking about before the podcast about memory and stuff. It sticks in my head that I was told I'm bred like a 15-year-old, and I was just like, that is better than I'd ever been assessed or, thought I was ever, doesn't mean I comprehend the same way. I can read as fast as a 15-year-old. I won't recall most of what I read if I read that fast, though, to be blunt. But I still, when you test that basic thing and time it, I can still regurgitate the words without sort of really soaking it in when I'm reading. I don't know, it's complicated. I don't get it myself. But yeah, so that was interesting, is the progression you make in that, and things that they pointed out when I was young, which I think is frustrating. And the problem with testing people so young is that they pointed out that they couldn't really tell if I was trying or if I wasn't trying when I was reading. You know what I mean? But because by 12, I suppose I had a lot of hang-ups, bullying and harassment, reading out loud, stuff like this. So they put that, we're not sure whether this is a true assessment of certain things. And so it was great having that one later, which basically said, no, these are exactly the same. And they hadn't read my old report because I couldn't find it. So it's interesting to see an independent assessment over 30 years later, just saying, yep, you are this. These are your deficits, and going, wow, they are. There's no denying it.
It's interesting. There's two points, hopefully, that don't drop out of my head as I'm saying them. It's starting to drop out of my head. Is, we can improve, even though our brains are predisposed to difficulties in reading, that we can improve, and the importance of early assessments and intervention so that children have the best opportunity they can to manage their disability and to build skills around it. But also, and we're getting way off topic. But
yeah, sorry.
Also, no, don't apologise, because it's important, and it's the conversation around assessments, particularly when you go into higher ed and you have to have that assessment. But how they couldn't decide whether you really was your dyslexia that was impacting you, or whether part of it was, this is in my terms, the baggage that you'd brought because by the time you were 12, you'd gone through all those difficulties. And that's what
rebellious
in my
kid.
head. Yeah. And for me, it was such anxiety to think I was being diagnosed at 27 with this disability, and how was my life going to change it? I'd taken all this I knew I had all this baggage in. And every time I did the testing, because it was over a few weeks, I'd go and sit in the car and I'd cry before I went home, because it's like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And so it's interesting. I wonder, again, the importance of having an assessment when we're younger, like even before we hit preteens, because we're not carrying so much baggage, and maybe it is a true reflection, or maybe it doesn't matter, because like yours demonstrated, regardless of the age difference, those primary challenges were still there.
Yeah. Look, I found a lot of benefit from doing it. But obviously it's a novel thing. You can't go back in time. But now I think, you'd be better positioned, of course, to tell me actually what they're doing. But they're assessing kids a bit better now, and isn't it part of what happens in school in grade 1 or 2 or something, that they are assessed for reading and writing skills, potentially, which would show up us. But it's not a formal assessment, so it's not something you can compare it to.
Some states, I think, are bringing in phonics checking in grade 1, which starts to give an early indication that children might be starting to struggle. But normally dyslexia typically shows up in grade 2 and onwards, when we're starting to put sentences together and to read whole words and bigger words.
Yeah.
So whether grade 1, I know that some states are looking at bringing it in, or they already are. Whether it's too early, I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to comment on phonics.
Yeah. Look, you explain things so much better than me regarding this.
No, well, it's an area I don't like to step into very often. But you got, I don't want to sidetrack the conversation, because it is around how we get into doing our PhDs, but the assessment process is really important. And, you had to demonstrate by the time you got into higher ed that you did have dyslexia and a disability. And so there's two questions. One is around, how do you self-advocate once you get through to a PhD level? Because what I've found is that supervisors, there's a misconception that if you're dyslexic, you're never going to get to that level. And I don't know, but I hated my speech degree, and it wasn't until I did my master's that I actually started to really love learning and see I could learn. And I just had in my head, I just had to do a PhD. And I don't know whether it was because I wanted to prove to people that I wasn't dumb and that I was succeeding in academia because I'd struggled all my life. It was just in my head, I had to do it. I didn't know what I was going to do it in. Originally, it was going to be on Aboriginal communities, and because that space I love working in. And then finally, it ended up being in dyslexia. But how do you, everyone told you could do it, so you said I was going to do it. Is that what drove you? Is it to see what's behind the desire to do your PhD? I guess it's a long-winded.
Yeah, look, it's really holistic, and I mean that in holistic and holistic. Both. There are a whole lot of things here. I mean, I love learning about this stuff. It's like an addiction. It's something which, I mean, even without doing study, I still do it anyway. I'll still sit there for hours and watch a bug climb up a tree and see how it does and why it does, and I can't get those out of my head. So to me, it was a really natural progression in that sense. The barrier was always dyslexia. I see it as, or dyslexia, or something which indirectly came from the dyslexia. So having everyone say, so me really wanting to do it because it's just a continuation of what I do. So it's like getting the opportunity for someone to pay you to do what you just love doing anyway, even though they make you do certain things like write a lot that you hate. They also make you read like all this research on it, which you love. It's just like you imagine it and you see what they're doing in your head. Like, you can see it and feel it. And you relate it to all those experiences you've had. And it was just a really sort of like joyful thing for my brain to do in that sense. And it makes the struggle of reading worthwhile. So before I was getting a whole lot of, assistances, and before I was really tapping into text to speech programs like that, the pain was so worth the benefits. And that's just because it's like an addiction. And that's probably a good way to describe it, because, addiction might not just be the chemicals, it can be the process, your environment, and a whole lot of other things. And to me, it's just me. And this is the cool thing about sort of like the way I see it as I became a kid again, because this was my escape. One of the escapes I did from the torture of school. It was, and home. And it was really, I only have good, strong, good and wonderful memories from learning about bugs and animals and fish and stuff like that. And so the PhD basically was, somebody just said, hey, look, you know what you want to do as a dream? You can do that. Here you go. And then, which made it, when it felt like it was getting taken away from me at some stage, because the supports really aren't there, a PhD, it made me fight to the death. And I hate using that word, but that was really how strongly I felt about it. I wasn't going to give up. Once somebody gave me that carrot, that's my carrot. This bunny is angry.
And I want to come back to self-advocacy. But it's interesting you say it's like an addiction, because originally when I wanted to do a PhD, I was like, yeah, that's just something in my head I have to do. But I completely resonate with you when it's like you're in your flow and your purpose. Like for me, and like even when my mum was dying, I was still writing my papers, still doing my thesis, and people would say to me, why are you doing it? And Uni kept saying, take a break. And I said, but that, for me, that is where I find my purpose and my passion. And I know the work I'm doing is going to make change for people. And
100%.
and I really resonate with that addiction word because it does feel like it, because you're constant. Like, I just love it. And I keep saying to people, I'm going to go on and do my prof doc or do another PhD, and everyone, because I don't get paid like you. It's all voluntary, 6 years of voluntary PhD.
That's dedication.
But I just love it, and I can't explain it because it's so hard. Writing is so hard. I'm terrible at it. But the concepts and being able to go out and talk to people about what I'm finding in Australian first research, that's the stuff that just drives me to keep going.
Yeah. Oh, look, a quick example, and then we'll get back on track. But when I was doing, what was it? It was my undergrad, and I was falling behind in stuff. It was my third year, I think. I was falling behind in stuff, and I just asked for an extension for my now supervisor. I think it was undergrad, or it was undergrad, whether it was honours or not, I'm not sure. Anyway, so my supervisor, my to-be supervisor, and she said, and I was volunteering for another scientist. I'm doing all this work, and she came and goes, "What are you doing here? You've asked for an extension, for this work because you don't have enough time to do it. And here I come in and you're doing volunteering work for somebody else on some other non-related project, blah, 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 blah." And my response to her was, "This is how I relax. Don't take this from me. Don't take this away from me." And I was so scared of it being taken from me that she felt it. Like, she's amazing. My supervisor is amazing. That she was like, "Okay," and left me to it. And that's it is. It was she was taking my hobby. And I needed that. I needed that to distress, and I needed that to get my head back in track, and to try and so I could get back on the horse and punch it again, and sit there for hours trying to write this thing and doing my head in and reading, blah, 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 blah. Anyway.
It's funny that our self-care is doing something that is so hard for us.
I know. I know, but isn't it great? I mean, haven't we just picked the best careers ever? Do you know what I mean? Life just moves you in funny ways.
Well, because I've been meaning to do a Facebook Live in our Facebook group, the other one, and our community, and it's about, my husband says that I've got an addiction of buying books. And I do. Every time I go to the post office, he's like, "What are you going to the post office for?" I'm like, "It's another book, but I really do need it." So, because I pick chapters out of different things, but it always makes me laugh that here I am with this reading difficulty, disability, but I just collect books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but then I listen to the podcast now to kind of help me, it supports my reading on that topic. And so it's, taking in information in different ways. But anyway, that's why we're doing our PhDs, because really it's our passion and it's part of our core. But it is really, really hard. And the writing for me, because I've got dysgraphia, that's what impacts me the most. And for me, self-advocacy hasn't been with my supervisors because they've had an amazing understanding of it. It's actually been with the inclusion and diversity unit, who had a poor understanding of dyslexia. And the type of support I need at PhD level is editing. And they thought that by having an editor, I was cheating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so my supervisors had to step in and have a meeting with them separately to say, this is not cheating, this is a disability, and this is the type of support that Shae needs. And you've had a similar experience around self-advocacy, and because there's no support for us at a PhD level, it adds an extra layer of complexity that we don't need. So what have you had to do to ensure that you've been able to get the reasonable adjustments you need at your level?
Yeah. Look, my story is similar to yours, in that, what I was confronted with was, I needed an academic assistant, essentially, to sit with me and help me learn statistical and modeling coding, so that I could do it, because I have to do it for all of my projects within my PhD. so it's I had to. I'm trying to think of how you say this simply. I kind of and I have the feeling that I don't want to insult anyone, because everyone ended up being such amazing help and support to get this, and I think that's it's important to acknowledge that. But I had to teach them about my needs and what I needed to do, and how I needed to do it, because all they've got is an understanding of what they've experienced and what they're taught, and they're not taught enough, and they're not really taught about. They're not specialists in dyslexia. So what I had to do was a really holistic plan. I basically had to become like a pseudo expert in it. So I've read a whole bunch of research on dyslexia. I've broken it down. It became another chapter of my PhD. Basically, it became another PhD project. I had to invest literally as much as I would invest in a PhD chapter, just so I could explain and make a case that what I needed was absolutely critical. And it wasn't just another, what was kind of described to me, not really put like this, but this is how it felt. Another emotional PhD student who's stressing out because the workload is too much. It's all new stuff. It wasn't that, because this had facets where the disability, I'm calling it disability because, and I hate it, but it just describes it very well. It's because the deficits I've got are really the main impactors here. It wasn't that I wasn't trying my hardest to be able to do what I was asked to do. I can't without help. So I don't know, getting accommodations, it was a battle. I didn't have anyone saying it could be done. I had a lot of people sympathizing, suggesting all sorts of stuff which was inappropriate to it just doesn't work, or well enough. And it was the only way I could get them was to be the teacher and teach them. And I'm trying not to patronize, but that's literally what I did. I had brought in research so that they would believe it. When you're pitching to a researcher who doesn't know, understand, or believe, best pitch it in their language and bring in research, peer-reviewed. There you go, in writing. And they're suddenly on that headspace. Oh, I can't really argue with these experts unless I read this thoroughly, understand it, and then maybe I can add constructive criticism and argue the theory. So it's one of the best things to do was to do that, and I did that. So I put my research hat on. Basically, I became, in some facets, I became the coach, the teacher, hopefully mentor. So hopefully the next person they get, like me, they and others will be quickly more open-minded. I don't know. I'm trying not to be negative about it, but at the end of the day, it was negative, and I shouldn't have had to go through anything not like this. It was horrific, but I did it anyway, and it's just how our culture is at the moment. And does that answer the question? It's hard to pick one simple factor.
Yeah, and I think that's some really great tips for our listeners who are either doing a PhD and they're struggling and they're not having the support, or for those who really want to do a PhD but they feel that they can't. I mean, this whole podcast hopefully tells them that they can when we've got the right supports in place. And it's interesting that you had to become the teacher, coach, and mentor, because outside of academic life, that's what we have to do constantly in our workplace, in our relationships, in everything we do. At the moment, we're in a culture that just doesn't have that understanding of our disability, difficulty, whatever term people would like to identify with. And And we're constantly having to do that, and it's exhausting. And I think at a PhD level, when we're already trying to manage our PhD, our dyslexia, and then we've got to add that additional layer, it can be exhausting, but it is doable. And you've trailblazed now for your university, and you've done some amazing work with them around raising that awareness for dyslexics to go through after you. And I think it's great what you've done. At Rethink Dyslexia, we are doing things differently. As a global leader in creating inclusive environments for adults with dyslexia, our commitment is to provide individuals with opportunities to live healthier, happier, and more connected lives. Through our range of tailored services, including coaching, learning and development programs, consultancy, and training, we are helping dyslexic individuals, businesses, and organisations to better understand and support their dyslexic employees. So if you're looking for insights, inspiration, and expert advice on dyslexia and how you can provide inclusive practices and environments, then head to rethinkdyslexia.com to find out more, or book your free consultation today.
Look, the saddest thing, which I also want to point out here, because this is a conversation I've had with others, of course, because, I mean, you know me, Shae, now, I'm, once I've got it, I'm just like, nah, that's it. I don't want anyone to go through it again. And it's just not right. And from what I've learnt and how I understand it, it's, if I don't make a bit of noise, then the fact is, in my area, in my sphere, then the fact is it's just a novelty and disappears, and nobody benefits from it ever again. And that to me is a fear. So what I've learned by talking to other people who are in similar positions to mine, and there aren't a lot, but because there aren't a lot of us trying PhDs, with at the sort of the levels my dyslexia is, that I've met way too many, and let's face it, one is way too many, and I've met more than that, who can't, or spoken to as well online, but face-to-face meetings as well, who can't do what I've done, don't believe they can do what I've done, and one of them definitely can't do what I've done, because their supervisors aren't behind it and open to it. The disability support services at that university aren't behind it or open to it. And, the culture basically isn't behind it and open to it. So I've met this, I spoke to this one person by messenger, and I was just like, I'm sorry, like, where you live, because she will never get a support like me, because of her country, because of her university within her country, because of supervisors, because of the disability services within the university. It's trickle down of like barriers. And so even though I've got this story of I got this, there aren't a lot of people out there who potentially could do this, which makes it so much more important for people who can, so that we can carve the way. Part of how I got this was your example, saying, hey, well, they did this. And the other example, at another university in my state, I won't name and shame, but they did this. And I said, well, if they're doing this, we're in the same freaking country, just tell me again why I can't get it. But I'm in a country where we can start saying that because of the great work that yourself, Judith, and others have done, and paved the way for us. But if I was in, Germany, or and let's shame them, and a whole of other countries, no, this is what my accommodation would be, a secret, like squirrel kind of a pact between the supervisors spending their budget and time to quietly, without telling anyone, help me, so that it's not seen as breaching integrity and some other things like that, and so that they don't have a student who fails and have a student who passes. And that's actually what happens. I know a student that's actually happening right now, and that's so upsetting. It is it's upsetting, it's frustrating, but I totally understand why the student is doing it this way, because from their perspective, they don't have a choice, and that's what we're lacking. We're lacking choice.
It's a really interesting point that you raise, because I think, for me, it's always about you as the person can do it, when we've got the right supports in place. But it's a whole conversation when those supports aren't in place. And I mean, we see it now in Australia I said I don't want to get involved in phonics before, but we're seeing it from primary school level all the way through. When there's that lack of awareness, we're taking away these children, these young people, these adults trying to do their PhDs, opportunities to have the best quality of life that they want, because the supports aren't being put in place for them that should be. And that's the heartbreaking bit of all of it, is all the people that miss out on the opportunities to have an education and to be able to do what they want in life. And my dad sits there often watching YouTube and saying to me, I wish I could have done that. And, partly because of his dyslexia that he couldn't, partly the socioeconomic background that he came from, that he didn't get those opportunities. And it makes me sad to hear him say those things. And it's so distressing to know that so many people have the potential and they're not getting the tools, and it is the environment that ends up disabling us to do what we want to do. And that is the hardest bit to hear.
Yeah. And look, we are getting, the universities are getting better at this. But, the longer they take to really master, being truly equitable and just, in so many areas, basically that I'll use this. The kill count rises. Yeah. Those who drop out, those who will never do it. I would never be doing this, as a, kid back then. That this is, no, I cannot see it at all ever possible unless I had like family support who would pay for tutors and this and that, and I didn't have that. So, it's, do you know what I mean? So we are moving forward. So I suppose, if any academics or, any admin are listening out there, you are getting better at it. Don't stop. But you just need to, really, up your game a bit, even with, budget limitations like we have now. It's a lot of people are falling by the wayside because it's taking a long time. And it's, that's such a general comment to make, because that's with any kind of discrimination, and you could sort of like apply it to.
No, but you're right. I mean, things are improving. If I look back, it's now 8 years ago since I started these podcasts and the foundation. I didn't know any adult dyslexics out there talking about it, which is why I started it. And, 8 years later, we've got neurodiversity, we've got neurodivergence, all these labels are coming out for us. But there's a lot more conversation happening, and there are improvements, from primary school all the way through. But there's still so much more that needs to be done. And it's not so much naming and shaming, it's really just awareness raising that at an academic level, our supervisors and the support people around us have the power to enable us to get a higher education, to complete a PhD. Like it's in there, like they have the power to make these changes. And if they're not aware of it, then they're not going to do it. And I was saying to Judith last night when we were going through my thesis that the video webinar we did during COVID around supporting PhD students, did you know we existed? Like that's had over 500 views. It's the biggest viewed webinar that we've ever done. Some people might say that, well, that's not a lot, but actually it is, because we've had people join our group from it. We've had academics come to us. But the initial conversation, the supervisors that were there just said, well, we didn't think dyslexics could even get to this level. So even just changing that perception and then giving people the psychological safe space to say to the supervisors, this is what I have and this is what I need, and then be allowed to have it.
Yeah. Yeah, this what you touched on was here's another example which I found absolutely fascinating. I was told that by the Disability Support Service, who have been amazing, absolutely amazing. But this is something that I was told, is that they've never seen somebody as dyslexic as me, trying to do a PhD. I know of someone who's most likely as dyslexic as me at the same university. The difference is the disability support services haven't been asked for help by them, because of a whole lot of barriers that we just spoke about before. And I'll never name them, but I know someone, and and that just speaks so much that this person exists and is there, and they're getting potentially, I'm not sure what the stage is now, I need to chat to them, but potentially a same type of accommodation I'm getting, but guess who's paying for it? It's, that's to be determined whether it's the student or the supervisor. It's not acknowledged. And that's how these students get through. And the student also has an amazing support network behind them of family who have helped them through every stage. But that's how they get through. It's the ones who are lucky enough to be in a situation where they can attain that, and I might be one of those who could have gone a different route in attaining my accommodation, and we would never be having this conversation. But for all of those who don't have that access, to me, it's crazy that there are so few of us, but even the few of us who actually get to make it here, it's a secret. It's a top secret about who's who, and there's so few who are willing to put up their hand and say, hey, this is what's happening. And unfortunately, that's impacting change for everyone, the way I see it. And it's sad. It's sad. It just speaks so much. Like it's a shameful thing. You've got to hide it and all this type of stuff. I don't know. Probably getting a bit sidetracked, but
no, raise really good points. One is around people, our own perception of our diagnosis and the shame of having a reading difficulty brings. Then there's the social and financial aspect of, I could probably afford to pay someone to edit my work. It would be difficult, but I work full time, so I could do that. But the injustice in me says, well, why should I? If someone else has a disability and they're allowed to access funds to ensure that they can do their studies, then why shouldn't I be allowed to? So there's that injustice of, fairness within the disability population. Our disability is just as important. There's the shame from people that don't want to disclose they have a disability. And then, for some people, it's such a financial barrier to get to this level anyway. And then they don't want to disclose and get the support. So it's so complex, and there are so many layers to having dyslexia. It's people just, I think it's great having this conversation and being able to start to peel the lid off the can. Is that saying? I don't know. I'm terrible at saying it.
I don't know. But
starting to peel the onion.
It's a good one though.
The lid off the can. I'll go to an onion instead. We're starting to peel away the layers of the dyslexic onion. And it is really layered and complex. And I've gone, brain's gone, because I'm thinking my thesis now. And what I'm trying to write about in my thesis about the layers of the onion. Maybe I need to put it in as the beginning.
Yeah. Look. I suppose, sort of summing up everything. It's in terms of gaining my accommodation, and it wasn't just me. I couldn't have done it alone. And for me to sort of say I got it for myself, the truth is, it's a we got it for myself. Do you know what I mean? There's a whole team of people behind the scenes who, as we unpeel that onion, the everyone learnt more and more and more, and that's one thing I loved about it is because I made sure they were talking to each other, even though they probably would have anyway. Brought in people who I thought should be in this conversation, et cetera, et cetera. I even name dropped the Dyslexic Foundation. You should ring them and talk to them.
Name dropped a lot.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But it was everyone who eventually, as a team, synergized and learnt from each other and actually got to the core of that onion and go, okay, we need this to help, this person out. If we really want to, be fair and equitable and offer, this person, the same rights to an education as the average, Joe and Flo. It's so that really needs to be stated, even though at the beginning that everything when said no, at the end everyone said yes, and because they all were open to it as well. So I'm lucky, and I see that.
And I have to say the same for me with my recent adjustments. It was a team effort as well. It was, and for me, because I can understand why someone might perceive editing support as plagiarism or not doing your own work. Plagiarism is not the right word, but, someone else writing it for you. And I think for me, one of the strategies has been working really closely with my supervisors so that they can see that it is my work, it is my ideas. And if at the end it's finesse, so it reads well, after 45 edits of a journal paper, they know it's my work. And so I think for people out there listening, that's a good strategy is, like Bill has done as well, working really closely with your supervisors so they can see it's your work and that they can stand up behind you and validate and say, yes, I know this student. I know that this is their work. They've just had those accommodations to bring it to the standard that's needed. For me, it was bringing the writing standard that was needed at that level of academia.
Yeah, and here's with every PhD, what you learn as a student, obviously, and I haven't met a PhD yet who doesn't say this. The supervisor you choose or chooses you will make or break your PhD, especially when you've got some barriers which need them to think outside the box. If they are stuck in a mindset or just getting students is just a way they have to do because it's part of the job description, or it gives me more budget, or bloody blah, burn and churn, gives me more citations, etc., etc. You need them to be in the fight with you. So sadly there are quite a lot of supervisors who would be unsuitable, I would say, from my experience, purely because they're just not the right people. They might be brilliant at what they do and they've shown themselves as that, but for somebody who has say greater needs than the average student, you really need a supervisor who wants to put in really sort of step into the ring. You can't have them treating you just like, no, this is my job, this is your job, bugger off. Or for dyslexic specific, well, if you're that dyslexic, you shouldn't be here, which is still an attitude which is there with some supervisors. As well, it obviously shows you can't do the work. That type of headspace. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point for us to finish on, really, is do your homework around your supervisors. I mean, for me, one of my supervisors is a speech pathologist. She was the head of speech and now moved into education. So she had a strong understanding of my disability and the difficulties that I was going to have. And I think that it's really, really important to be open with your supervisors around your difficulties and whether they're going to have the capacity and ability to support you. And it works both ways. The supervisor needs to be aware so they can make that decision that yes, I'm going to have the capacity to step in the ring and provide this additional support, or actually, no, this is not what I am here to do, and it's not going to be the right student for me. And so I think it works both ways, but being aware and doing your research on your supervisors is a really important point, I think, for us to wrap our conversation up on. And I think that if you're looking at doing your PhD or you're doing your PhD already, please join our Facebook group or our once a month catch-ups if you'd like to, because it really is helpful being able to talk to other people about what they're struggling with. And it's not always about our dyslexia. It could be anything in life.
100%.
But it is mainly around the research we're doing. And it's really, really important that we have more and more dyslexics that are interested in this space of learning and academia and research to go for it. There is a network of people out there that are here to help and support.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I think we should leave it there then on the 100% note.
Yeah, so this is a new thing. I'm picking up jargon of the younger generations.
Was there anything else you wanted to add, Bill, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, look, just one quick thing. If I can, in this journey of mine, I've met a lot of people who are dyslexic, who or possibly dyslexic, who are still in the shadows and they don't want to come out. It's safe to come out. Come out, help. Don't struggle in silence. Just please come out, because it'll help you, it'll help everybody else, and it's the right time now to do that. When I was a kid, don't come out. I'm sorry, you would have got hurt a lot. Now it is actually the right time to do it. So please come out.
I couldn't agree more, because now is the right time, because there are so many more adults talking about their lived experience, whether it's in academia or across the board. And it is, I feel like it's never been a more safe time. I mean, look, there is still prejudice and misconception, but as a united voice, we are stronger, and we can change the perceptions of people. It's much easier for me to do it with a community than what I was trying to do 8 years ago on my own. So thank you, Bill, for spending time chatting with me today. It's been wonderful. It's been just fantastic listening to your story, but also your passion for learning and our shared addiction of research. And
where does it end?
Yeah, where does it end? I don't think it ever will. Hopefully I get to teach one day in this space. But anyway, different story, sidetracking, wrapping up. So thank you so much again for coming on the show. It's just been a joy to meet you through my PhD journey. And and hopefully we can catch up again soon. So have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you haven't done so already, make sure you sign up to our mailing list so you can keep up to date with everything we are doing at Rethink Dyslexia. So head to rethinkdyslexia.com.au. And don't forget, if there's anything you heard today that was distressing, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.